Before we go into this episode, I want to ask a question for all of you who are watching this right now, because if you're watching this right now, there's a pretty good chance you're my target audience for this kind of feature. So there's something I've been debating for a while. As you know, or as you probably know if you've been watching any of my stuff, I have what I consider uniforms for each of my little features. I wear something different for each particular segment I do. This is the same outfit I wear for each of these Voyager things. My very, very, very old Klingon shirt and my black overshirt that kind of matches it. And I've got the thing for Babylon 5, and I got the thing for, the cloak for my ruminations, that kind of a thing. I've been debating for a while now, months actually. I've got my eye on a couple of Star Trek uniforms that I could get, some nicely made ones that look like they'd be good. And, originally I was just like, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, but I started thinking about it. I'm worried that it might, for lack of a better term, damage my visual image. Since this is still a show and I do still need to make money off of this show, I don't want someone to show up and be like, oh my god, what a loser, and see that and then walk away. But at the same time, the other side of that coin is, well, maybe they would be more understanding, because if you're going to watch a show about Star Trek, because this would be something I would wear for my TNG or DS9 ruminations, then you're probably going to be willing to accept the uniform. So I thought, why don't I just go ahead and ask you guys what you think? Do you think that would be a good idea? Do you think it would be a bad idea? Or you're indifferent? Please, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Now, to get to the episode proper. So, one of my loyal viewers, who's awesome, his name is WKC. I actually don't know what his name is, but WKC is his moniker. He's a cool guy. And he made a comment about another episode, and that comment stuck in my head for this episode, because this episode is just fun. That's pretty much the definition of this episode in a nutshell. It's not super in-depth, it's not super intellectual, it has a few nitpicks that I'm going to point out as we go through, but it's a very fun episode, and it does some good stuff right. For example, it doesn't actually make the threat of the week seem stupid, but I'll get to that later. It even does the 7 learns a lesson thing right, but I'll get to that later too. So first we've got the new Delta Flyer. Now this is going to sound like a very small nitpick, and that's because it is, but I kind of would have liked it more if they had had more of a gap between just, and now we've got a new Delta Flyer, and by the way, it's better. I like the fact that they have it. I like the fact that they call out that they have it, because the Delta Flyer was destroyed back in Unimatrix Zero, sometimes called Unicraptrix Zero. And if they had just suddenly had the Delta Flyer and never actually referenced the fact that it was destroyed, that would have been aggravating to people like me, who like things like continuity and string continuity. But in this case, that would just be a form of setting continuity. So the fact that they acknowledge that change and move forward with it, that's good stuff. What I wish was that there was a little bit more weight to it, because as is, it feels like, oh, we lost the Delta Flare. Oh well, quick, replicate a new one. Oh well. That being said, I do like the idea of smaller craft getting engaged in a race. Hey, you want to race over there? Yeah, sure, we could do that. Zoom! It's cool. I don't actually have a better way to put that. It adds something that Star Trek, in my opinion, sorely needs. Setting flavor, to be more specific. The idea of there being a space race. I know that sounds like a stupid phrase when you say it like that, but seriously, that kind of sports event happening in space is something that's actually quite logical when you really think about it. It's the kind of thing that, honestly, I'm a little amazed we haven't seen more of up until now. When you think of all the aspects of human culture that exist here on this dirt ball that we've got right now, so much of it could be translated or reinterpreted or lead to concepts that can lead into new ideas when applied in the space setting. And so the idea of having this interstellar, it's not even an interstellar race, it's like just across a couple of systems. No, sublight speeds only. That's cool! I like that. It adds very much needed flavor to the work. Now, here's my first nitpick. I got like 3. So they beam her over. Why is she standing, right? Now, here's the thing. She's standing, and we've seen before, it's either a continuity error or it's actually something that transporters can do, depending on who you listen to. But sometimes people will go from a sitting position when they're beamed out to a standing position when they're beamed in. That's actually happened before. That's not what I mean, though, as far as possibly explaining this nitpick. I have a slightly different theory. As we know, spoilers for the later part of the episode, there's a pretty good chance that her initial incident when she was first racing the Delta Flyer right at the beginning, that that she deliberately sabotaged her ship to get in with the Delta Flyer in order to use them for her overall plot, okay? Make sense? So it is very likely that she actually was standing at that point in time. She wasn't sitting at the controls desperately trying to get things fixed, because she broke them. So this is either an example of really good writing, because that's foreshadowing, really bad writing, because they just allowed her to mix this, or a continuity gaffe. Take your pick. But I thought I'd list that. So, Tea Time. I always love seeing more of Robert Picardo, but I love his whole thing. I'm going to try this brand new thing that other doctors do. Golf. I actually do rather enjoy golf, although not by myself. It's boring playing golf by yourself. You do it with family. You do it with your dad. That's awesome. I used to go golfing with my dad and my grandpa all the time, actually. But the thing I like about that, though, is he makes this comment about Taurus's thing, where she's going to this mega amazing place. I don't remember the name of it, but you know what I do remember? It makes Risa look like a tourist trap. Now that really stuck in my head, because we've seen Risa 3 times in Star Trek. Once on TNG, once on Deep Space Nine, and once on Enterprise. And all 3 times it's kind of been a crap hole. I'm sorry. I don't like any of those 3 episodes across Star Trek. I think all 3 of them are average at absolute best, and that would be the TNG one. But more to the point, isn't Risa actually a tourist trap? Like, they have an entire industry built around being a tourist trap. And I know this is a weird thing to comment on, but as I was hearing that, I was just thinking, but Risa is a tourist trap, especially in Star Trek Online. I have a comment here, great chemistry. I've been debating if I want to talk about this in a greater thing or not, but let's just say, recently, by my perspective, this is about a month ago for you guys, I have been accused of being needlessly negative towards Voyager. And I don't agree with that at all, of course, but that is naturally just my opinion. I am someone who has defended Voyager many times. I'm the person who still enjoys Voyager. Hell, I've watched Voyager, I actually counted this out this morning. Like, I think this time through is like my 6th time watching the entire series, regardless of reruns and whatnot. That's actually more than I've watched Deep Space Nine. No joke. Although there's kind of a story behind that. I'm not going to bore you with that right now. Point being, though, I like Voyager. I do. I actually rather enjoy it. The idea of me being like, on it is just, But the one thing I wanted to comment, and this is the one thing Voyager has done well since the very first episode, since Caretaker, all the way back in the day when they first started with some behind-the-scenes problems, is the chemistry. The actors. See, a good actor can act in a vacuum. A good actor can portray a role or portray the pathos of a scene and whatnot in a vacuum, when it's just them acting against a camera or with a director. But there's a slightly different thing. It doesn't have to do with the quality of acting. It doesn't have to do with whether you're a good actor or not. There's just this ineffable quality, which I refer to as chemistry, that happens when you're acting with another actor, when you and another person are on stage together. Now, over time, you can grow chemistry between actors. This has happened many times. In fact, probably my favorite example, this is Babylon 5. No offense to Babylon 5, but in Season 1, the actors had terrible chemistry. Even though the lines made it look like they had good chemistry, it took till about the end of Season 1 for Sinclair and Garibaldi to look like they had any kind of chemistry on camera together, despite the fact that everything else, directing, writing, character design, was indicating that they had great chemistry. They didn't. So they learned that over time. But in Voyager, for whatever reason, maybe it was just luck, maybe it's just the actors involved, maybe it was the fact that it was Star Trek, and that adds that sort of oomph behind the work. Knowing that you're working on a Star Trek, that used to really mean something. It probably still does, actually. So there was something else ineffable there about Voyager that really made the actors just have automatic, really great chemistry between each other. And that is all over the place on this episode. Neelix and Taurus, Taurus and the Doctor, Janeway going against Tuvok against Janeway, and of course, and then there's Harry and Tom, Harry and B'Elanna, and then finally, most importantly, B'Elanna and Tom. There's just amazing chemistry on the screen, and it really adds. It basically elevates the whole work. And this is a nice segue to the second of Seven's lessons in humanity. I know I'm skipping forward in my notes, but that is a good segue, so I'm going to use it. So Seven actually learns 2 lessons about humanity in this episode. But it's okay, I'm not actually nitpicking that, because for once it's woven into the narrative. I will give an update 11 minutes ago about the thing. You know, it's actually a lesson she's already learned. It's presentation value. It's the value of something other than the base components. She's actually learned this lesson a couple of times before, actually. But the idea of presentation value, if you listen to her talking about how that there's this race and currently these people are in the lead at the 64% mark, that is kind of boring sounding. By contrast, Neelix, good job to Ethan Phillips on this one, does a pretty good job of being like, and they're going, and oh my god, he's moved into the second, but now he's doing this, and he's going around the third hairpin. It's going to be a close race, guys. You know, presentation value. It's actually something I've been working on myself because I've been kind of commentating on Overwatch matches recently, and I've been trying to get better at that sort of oomph to my presentation to make it sound interesting as we're presenting it. So getting back to my notes in order here, just jumping way back up to the top of the page here, I like the idea of sports instead of war. Now, I've actually posited this idea in the past for World of Warcraft, actually. The idea of maybe you could have war games and friendly competitive interactions, war games and sports and all that kind of stuff, instead of the constant we have to murder you because because of reasons, basically. I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind it. And I've posited this idea too. I actually wrote an entire story arc for a MOBA that I was designing in my head that never actually went anywhere, where these people had decided to do this competitive MOBA-style game in lore, rather than to constantly kill each other for resources. So in other words, if I want this new territory, I have to beat the owner of that territory in the sports game, not actually in battle. But anyways, I like the idea. It's a cool idea. It's one that I feel isn't actually done that much. Now, in the interest of fairness, I do get how sports can get kind of rough, even in real life. There's the one gentleman who's like, sports, you know, this race is just another form of a battle. But let's be honest with ourselves, there are people who think that way. If you don't know what the word hooliganism means, well, maybe you shouldn't look it up, but let's just say that it's caused some very serious, real problems in real life. It's bad. Really bad. And yeah, so people can get pretty serious and pretty violent about sports as well. But I would posit the theory that that's still better than let's go to war and send our young to die kind of a situation. So, cool concept. I like that. It's a good framework for the overall episode. Especially since, if you think about it, it ties into the overall character arc. In fact, both the overall theme of the race, the threat of the week of the isolationist group, and the plot itself, I guess that's just three things. All of these things tie in together. The main character plot between Tom and B'Elanna. All of that is woven in all three aspects of the episode. Good job, whoever did that. So I mentioned here, I like the Tom and Taurus dynamic. I've said before that Star Trek doesn't usually do relationships well because, and this is just my opinion, of course, Star Trek doesn't usually do relationships. It does flings. It does, you're hot, let's have sex, or I like you, crush, crush. And that's about as far as Star Trek usually goes, especially on Risa episodes. But every now and again, 3 times I would posit, it is my theory that there have been 3 genuinely interesting relationships, romantic, I should clarify, relationships in Star Trek. That would be Keiko and O'Brien, Tom and B'Elanna, and actually, you're going to laugh at me for this, but Tucker and T'Pol over on Enterprise, especially in the end of Season 4. There was some very powerful emotional chemistry between the two of them, and I liked that. The whole half-Vulcan child thing. Oof. Anyways, so moving along, the point here being that that's one of the reasons I really enjoy this episode, because what we're seeing is a relationship. In fact, that's part of the point of the dynamic of their plot, is that Taurus thinks they're in a fling, you know, the usual thing, and Tom doesn't, but he doesn't portray that because he's holding back. It's a very subtle point, by the way, if you notice it. We see, plain and apparent, Taurus literally spells it out for the viewer, that I want what's happy for Tom. I'm going to hold back my feelings and my emotions because I care about him, and I want him to be, you know, better. I want to do what is best for him. I say it's a subtle point because that's blatant and obvious, and you kind of miss the fact that Tom's been doing the exact same thing this whole time. That he has been restraining himself from how he really feels and not trying to get into quote here, the mushy stuff, because he didn't want to push that on her, because he thought that was what was best for her. Both people have been doing the same thing because of how much they love each other. I like that. I also like how Taurus, it would be so typical in television to be like, I want to go do this, I want to go do this, fight, fight, fight. They don't do that, though. There is a fight, but it's barely even a fight. It's very well written, too. And there's a lot of really well-done examples. I'll go over examples, but, like, for example, I find it ironic. Let me just start going down the list. I'll find it ironic that Taurus calls themselves Mukta, people who don't fit, when the two actors, Roxanne Dawson and Robert McNeil, have such amazing chemistry together that the two of them just fit on camera perfectly. I also, so it's funny that they point that out, and Taurus is convincing herself that this isn't going to work out. I also like how Neelix goes out of his way to reach out to Taurus in that scene in the messel. I know I'm segueing for a moment, but hear me out, because that's very logical. It's very correct, I think is the way I want to put that. Neelix, well, we're in season 7. Neelix has stopped being, you know, the irritant that he was, that people were trying to make him into a comedic factor early on, and he's become Neelix, as I tend to like and enjoy him. But Neelix also has had 6 years of understanding and knowing B'Elanna Torres. She's kind of got the Ro Laren thing going on for her. In other words, I want to be alone, and that's why I'm sitting very obviously alone in the middle of a crowded room, because I want everyone to know how much I don't have to do. In other words, she doesn't actually want to be alone. She's just wanting someone to break through that barrier and take care of her. And Taurus has been that since day one. So Neelix isn't even deterred. He just immediately, let me just come over here and sit and talk with you. And he doesn't try to, he says he's going to cheer her up, but he doesn't try to tell jokes. He doesn't try to push his philosophy on her in any major way. He just talks with her about her problems and lets her vent at him, which is exactly what she needed. It's a good scene. There's, hang on, let me zip down my notes here. Let me just do this in order, because the next thing I have noting here is Seven's first lesson in humanity, not the presentation one. That actually happens later. Her first lesson in humanity is interestingly presented, and again, I'm not going to nitpick it, because it's a lesson she already learned. What she's doing is explaining the lesson she learned to Torres. Now that's actually a pretty decent way and a nice way to twist the Seven learns a lesson about humanity cliche that's propped up for the last year at this point. Because in this case, she's actually saying, I already learned this. I understood that by showing interest in someone else and engaging in things they like as well as I like, we get a greater bond and it improves efficiency because we work better together. And that's true. I've actually talked about this on my show. One of the things I used to do as a kid, and I still do to an extent, I used to go out of my way, if I found out a friend or someone I knew liked cars, I'll use a real example, then I made it my point. I actually went out of my way on my own time to get into cars. Why? So that I could talk with them about it. So that we would have a point of mutual interest. And maybe cars would be interesting to me, and maybe they wouldn't. They did end up being interesting to me. But in this way, I would be able to have a point of relation with that individual. I could actually talk with my friend about something they liked. It's a fairly basic social concept, but it's one I feel needs to be emphasized because it is very, very valuable and very important in real-life society to find those connecting points, or to, if you have to, build them. And I like how Seven demonstrates that. Huge praise to the FX team, really. I give them huge praise. They do a great job in this episode overall. The one shot I want to point out in specific is the race taking off, and then it cuts into the crew watching from the mess hall, and you can see the shadows going over the bulkhead. That was a really nice shot. Good job, FX team. So about halfway through the episode, the race is almost done. That's actually a nice touch, because if you're paying attention to it, you'll notice, well, hang on, the race is almost over. And that's about the point at which you realize the race is the B plot, the non-important plot, if you will. The A plot, very clearly being the Tom and B'Elanna stuff. Now, and then there's the Tuvok scene. I don't have much to say about it other than the fact that it's awesome. Tuvok's like, here's... because it is very Tuvok. Tuvok is interested in the race results. He's just not allowing him to show it. He is more controlled about it. Here's the results. Would you like to talk about this? After all, Tuvok has the ability to multitask. He could talk about the security concerns while keeping an eye and an ear on the race, and then the race data goes away. That's when Tuvok shows interest, because now he no longer has the ability to multitask, because the other task isn't even there. Tom's hesitance during the race. He's like, I don't want to do this. He gets kind of angry a little bit. Now, we've seen Robert McNeil do that exact same type of anger several times before, and it always means the same thing. It means he cares. It means he is being protective. It means that rather than Harry, who is his best friend, he has B'Elanna, the woman of his dreams. He is more protective of her than he would be of anybody else in question. He wants to ensure that they're safe and they get home safely. And that's why he doesn't want to go through with the risky endeavor of moving through the shields. And that's why he gets upset about it. It's a nice touch. And it's a nice little bit of foreshadowing because it showcases, even though we, the audience, probably already understood this, how much Tom genuinely cares about B'Elanna rather than she's just fun. And then, of course, they're going to end the peace! Dun, dun, dun. I hate to point this out. This is my second nit. I really hate to point this out. They make a point of showcasing quite a few racers on the line. And they mention a few of them as they go. There's like 10 or so. I didn't actually count. We only ever see the 3. The Voyager crew, of course, the crazy lady, and the fighter pilot. And that's it. Hassan, I think, was his name. I don't remember her name. She's crazy lady. That's her name from now on. There's no cats involved. And these 3 people are treated as if they are a consensus of the whole race. When they actually bring in people, it's like, should we continue or not, peace treaty or not, they're the only ones who have a vote as to whether or not the race should continue, as if that was a representative of the majority of those who have the political interest in this race. Because remember, this is the first time they've done this. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that it's 1960 or 1970, okay? Pretty much when the Cold War was pretty bad. And obviously, I was not around back then, unless I'm a Time Lord. But as you're thinking about that period of time, I want you to imagine that the Soviet Union and the United States of America say, let's back away from the war stuff. No more expansive aggressionism, no more capitalist spreading of propaganda. Why don't we resolve our differences through insert sport here? The sport doesn't matter, okay? Or insert through sports here. That's also possible, okay? Like a kind of a new Olympics, if you will. Now, that is actually an engaging and interesting idea and might even have worked. But the first time it was ever done would have been the most dangerous time and the time it was most likely to fail. Because everyone's still in kind of the we're opponents. We are at war, just a Cold War mindset. There's still a lot of the other side feelings there. And there's going to be people on both sides and in third parties in between who have a vested interest in ensuring that this peace does not work. So there will be people actively trying to sabotage it, and people within who aren't sure that this is a good idea to begin with. If you manage to get over that hurdle of the first event, the second one will go much smoother. As with all things in life, starting usually is the hard thing, not continuing. So I mention that because it's very logical that the first race, is the one that has so much on the line. They need it to succeed for this peace to actually seem viable, because now, the second time it happens, a year from now or a month from now, or however long it is, whatever cycle they decide for this, it's going to be a lot simpler because now it's a proven concept. Now they've seen, okay, we can peacefully compete with each other and stop murdering each other over chunks of lines in the sand, Chunks of lines? You know what I mean. I was going to say chunks of dirt in space and then lines on the sand, and I kind of... But that's very important. It's a very good thing to help keep in mind as we're going through this episode. But of course, that's just kind of backdrop between the relationship stuff. Because we see there's some great parallels between the Harry... Serena, that's her name. That's Crazy Lady's name. I'm going to keep calling her Crazy Lady. Harry and Crazy Lady's relationship and Taurus and Tom's relationship. I get the personal opinion that Crazy Lady and Harry actually did have real chemistry and got along together. But that's kind of antithetical to what she believes in, the idea of let's not get along with other races, being one of the isolationist groups of her own volition. So I also... there's a couple of things I really like about this scene. I just have a couple of notes here. First of all, I really like how as soon as it gets through to him that this is a real problem, that Taurus is genuinely bothered about their relationship, his first reaction immediately is, let's talk about it. In the middle of the race. The race just drops in his opinion. He's like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's do this. And because, again, it's showcasing what I've already told you about. Tom obviously gives a damn. He obviously really, truly loves Taurus. Not, I am in love with you. Not, I am in lust with you. Not, you're fun to be around. This is a man who is showcasing through his actions that he is willing to commit to all that a relationship means, good and bad. And he showcases this many times in this episode. It's a really nice series of touches. And again, goes back to that whole he was sacrificing just like she was thing I mentioned earlier. And then when it becomes serious, and he's like, okay, this race doesn't matter. I need to get through to you. And he just pulls the brakes, ironically saving the day in doing so. Pulls the brakes, walks over and says, well, he doesn't say this, but what he is presenting, presentation values, remember that thing, how presentation value matters? He is showing, through action, through his presentation, how much he cares. It's great. I love it. I also love how poor Harry, every girl he falls for, at least he gets the damn gun and manages to save the day. Props to Harry, and props to the crew for finally allowing Harry to actually save the freaking day. There's some really, really, really good directing in the back and forth between Harry and Crazy Lady, and then Tom and B'Elanna. Each scene jumps back and forth at a critical point in the conversation so that the other conversation helps to fill gaps in the previous one. And it keeps the narrative moving forward. And, like I mentioned right at the beginning, it weaves the thread of the week into the overall character arc. And I like that. And then it ends awesomely, as it should. But I have one last really small nit. I'm really sorry. I don't want to end on a nit. But they had such up-to-date information and scanning equipment and whatnot that they were able to go in a to-the-second, basically, update of what was going on in the race. And yet they didn't notice the Delta Flyer stopping. Nobody attempted to contact the Delta Flyer. Why are you stopped? Maybe that's disallowed. But nobody in any way acts as though they're surprised that the Delta Flyer doesn't win. Even though they were so far in the lead, they had to stop for a significant period of time to lose. Nobody noticed the fact that they were running away from the track. Well, actually, that's not true. They noticed once, briefly. But no, they didn't. That's right, they didn't. It was Harry and Crazy Lady who noticed they were leaving the track. Why did nobody on Voyager notice that they were leaving the track? Why did nobody on Voyager notice the fact that there was this isotopic thing that was going off? They've got good sensors, and they're, in space terms, they're right there. You know, 1,000,000 kilometers? That's nothing in Star Trek. And then they go over to the nebula, nobody notices that, and then the shockwave hits, and that's what they notice. Even though there's someone on the bridge, and we know that because that's where they get the information that the shockwave hit, and what it meant. Huh? It's a nitpick. It's a small nitpick. I only got the 3. Everything has flaws. Even good stuff has flaws. This is a great episode. I really liked this episode. It was a nice thing to come to after Unimatrix Zero. Granted, imperfection was good too, but still. Here's hoping the rest of Season 7 will be pretty good. What's the next episode? Repression? I don't remember what that one is. Oh, God, and then there's Inside Man. Oh, God. I'll see you next time, guys.